guys, I'm Amy Wadsworth of 804 Sycamore. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'm so excited about this video because I did a copycat piece from Restoration Hardware, except mine's a little bit shorter and it's longer. I designed it to fit a specific wall across from my dining room, and I'm so excited to show you. It's a little bit rustic farmhouse with some really neat details. Super easy to make. I did it all by myself, and I hope you like the stain color that I used. I'm excited to tell you more about that. No fumes, super safe, and just the most gorgeous color you've ever seen. So please give me a thumbs up if you like the video, and be sure to leave those comments. I do answer them and check them often. So let's get going.
Okay guys, so to construct this rolling cart, I used 2x8 boards and 2x4s. That's it. I happen to have 2x8 boards on hand from a table they were extra from a table that I did, and so I wanted to use those up. I always like to cut one of the ends fresh before I start, and then I measure from the fresh cut end. If you're looking for a cut list for the exact dimensions that I used, you can go ahead over to the blog 804sycamore.com. You'll find that link in the description below. But go ahead, and once you make all your cuts for the shelves, then we can start constructing them. Now you can see that I really wanted them to be all the same, and so I did some stacking. It was fewer cuts, and I just used common boards, so nothing fancy. Now, after you have all your boards cut, it's time to go ahead and make some pocket holes. That's the construction that I use to build the shelves. So I'm marking my spots in my 2x4. I start with the center, go to the ends, and then mark some inside, and then I just drill them all. So what I'm doing is I'm drilling holes into the 2x4s because I will be attaching the 2x4s to the 2x8s. It was just easier for me to do it that way. You're going to want to go ahead and set your drill bit at 1.5 inches, and then you're going to use 2.5 inch Craig screws. So after you clamp it and have it set up, just drill your holes all the way, drill your screws all the way in. Make sure your drill gun is set to screwing, setting 1, and I put my torque all the way up because these 2x4 boards are pretty hard. So this is the construction for every single shelf. You just attach the 2x4s to the 2x8, and make sure that your pocket hole screws are both on the underneath side of the shelf. Okay, so once you have the shelves, on the inside shelves, I went ahead and added more pocket screws just to the end 2x4. So 2 holes into each 2x4. This is how I'm going to attach the shelves to the 4 corners, except for the very top shelf, and that one is set on top of the 2x4s, so I'm going to use screws to directly attach it. And then on my very top shelf, I didn't want anyone seeing my pocket holes, so just add a dab of wood glue, and then you're going to use these Craig plugs, and I used a hammer to kind of make sure they were set all the way in. And then once the wood glue is dry, we're going to go ahead and cut those off. Now you can do this to all of your shelves, but I wasn't worried about it because it's somewhat of a rustic piece, and I was really only concerned about the very top shelf being able to see those holes in there. So it's totally preference up to you, but I just did it for the top shelf of this cart. It's only about 5 feet, so if you're doing a taller cart, you may consider doing this to more shelves. So now I just took my multi-tool and I am shaving off the raised part of the plugs and just feeling it with my finger to make sure it's smooth. And this is how you fill those holes. So now that all your shelves are constructed, we're going to go ahead and attach the 4 corners to the bottom shelf first. I like to pre-drill, get some pilot holes for my 3-inch wood screws, and these are going to, this is what's going to be attached to that bottom shelf. So it would probably be better to have an extra set of hands but I just used my carpenter square, and it was easy enough to drill in the screws since I did pre-drill the holes. So once again, 3-inch screws into 3 holes. And then once you get all 4 boards in, then you can go ahead and attach the top shelf. I used common boards, and so they're not perfectly squaring up, but just do the best job you can. Wood is organic, and so it's not going to necessarily be perfectly square all the time, especially cheaper common boards. But this is structurally sound, and these 3-inch screws are very sturdy. So this is how I connected my top shelf, and I wasn't worried about those screws. Now for the inside shelves, again, I just did the pocket hole construction, and that was set. Now once all the shelves are in, that's when I wanted to drill my holes for the decorative bars in the back. I love this press, and I already had the bit, so I went ahead with a 1-inch wooden dowel because I already had the 1-inch drill bit. I just centered up my drill bit, and then it drilled a perfectly smooth hole. If you want to see another project I used for this, I've linked my pegboard in the description as well. So you get your wooden dowels in there, just twist and push, and then go ahead and use that multi-tool once again to smooth off the ends. Once everything is in and done, go ahead and sand it. I sanded with 80 grit, and then I directly went to 220. I only used 2 grits because the wood was quite rough and it was more of a rustic piece, and so I wasn't worried about the smoothest finish I could do. Now this stain is by Rove and Dwell, and it's the farmhouse color, and I love it because it's natural, there's no fumes, and it turns out beautifully. You can go ahead and apply a second layer if you'd like after it's completely dry. At least 4 hours, or up to 4 hours it could take to dry, just depending on the environment. I only used 1, so when you see my after photos, you can kind of determine the lightness. And I just used a staining sponge to put it on, and then the sponge is nice because it also lifts up any extra. It's hard to do it heavy-handed when the sponge kind of evens it out. And then this is a whitewash, and I ended up actually using a paintbrush to paint it on evenly, and then I let it sit for 2-3 minutes, and then I used my staining sponge to soak it up. So that gave me a nice weathered look. Now I'm adding casters so that it's a true rolling cart. These are 2-inch non-skid casters just found at Home Depot, and I ended up using 2-inch screws. I just really want, 1-inch screws. I want to make sure that they didn't extend through the shelf, but that they were long enough. And then these decorative brackets are really fun, just adds a nice detail. And I didn't screw them in with the screws that came with it. I just used these upholstery nails because I have enough screws in the construction of it, and the nails worked perfectly. So here's my piece, you guys. I hope you like it. I absolutely love it in this little skinny space. The coloring's great. It's fun to style. I can move it around. It kind of looks vintage. I just love it. So please give me a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe.